How's it going here? Welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to be going through my impressions of the OnePlus Nord N200 5G, basically my pros and cons, things I like and don't like, after using this for off and on for the better part of about 2 weeks now. And so first off, just a quick rundown of the specs in case you're really wondering. First off, the price, it's about $216 at full cost from T-Mobile right now, or you can get it free with a trade-in. So I think that's a pretty good deal that a lot of people are taking advantage of right now. And I think this phone is getting in a lot of hands because of that. It's $240 if you decide to buy it straight unlocked from OnePlus. It features the Snapdragon 485G. They want to hit a low price 5G phone. That was pretty much the target, it seems like here. And you've got 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage with micro SD card expansion. It's got about a 6.49 inch IPS LCD display. It's got a 1080p display with 90Hz refresh rate. So it's nice that they added a high refresh rate display on a fairly low cost phone. You can see it's got a triple camera system. I use that loosely because it's a 13 megapixel main wide angle sensor that can shoot up to 1080p 30 frames per second video. But it's the second and third are a 2 megapixel macro and depth sensors respectively. So not too useful as far as the other two lenses. It doesn't have an ultra wide or telephoto. So pretty much a single lens camera to me, and a front facing 16 megapixel selfie camera that can also shoot up to 1080p video. You can see the punch hole right there in the upper left. And then you've also got 5,000 milliamp hour capacity battery. So a very large battery built into this phone, and it's not really thin, but it's not really super chunky either. Very lightweight because it's all plastic, and I think this phone looks really nice for being all plastic. So quick rundown of the specs there, and let's just jump right in. I think to hit a low cost price point phone like this, there are always going to be compromises. And so let's start off with the cons or things that I don't like, and they're probably pretty obvious but worth mentioning just so that people can kind of set their expectations as far as what they're getting into, because I think a lot of people are getting this phone because of the free deal. So first thing off is going to be pretty obvious, which is going to be performance. So with a Snapdragon 480 processor in this thing, it's not going to be the fastest phone necessarily, and they pretty much prioritized 5G over performance. So they tried to hit a low cost 5G phone so that carriers like T-Mobile can sell this and subsidize this and give it away for free, get it into as many hands as possible so that they can sell you on 5G. Other manufacturers are putting in higher end and faster chipsets at this price point, but don't necessarily support 5G bands in the US. That being said, it's not like the 480 is that bad. As you can see, just scrolling around can be pretty smooth. Launching apps takes a little bit longer if you're coming from a higher end phone, obviously, but as you can see here, you can see a little bit of hiccup here and there, and it's going to lag from time to time, and that's just what it is. Performance is not that bad. If you're coming from a higher end phone, temper your expectations. It's not going to be super fast or blazing, but it's far from poor performance. I think this is definitely very usable for day-to-day tasks, suitable for social media, web browsing, email, all that kind of stuff. You're not going to really go wrong with doing all those basic things. There is going to be minor lag from time to time and some hiccups in some of the animations. That's just part of the deal with this processor. It can play basic games, and so it's not like you're relegated to doing pretty much next to nothing on this. You're not going to be extremely limited, but it's just that you're not going to be able to do some of the higher end intense games, maybe video editing if you're a creator. But for basic everyday things, I don't think you're going to be very disappointed at all. So that's pretty much performance. The second con or second thing that I didn't really like is the low light camera performance, and that's pretty obvious. Most phones at this price point will sacrifice camera quality in lower light. While not bad, it's not really great. It does have a night mode in here, so you can see the camera app. This is what it looks like. It does have a night mode, but as you can see from the camera samples here, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So I think it's just thrown in there to say I've got night mode, but as you can see from the actual samples and the evidence, it doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot of improvement there, and it's pretty much kind of useless in my opinion. The other aspect of the camera that's a bit of a letdown is that the front-facing camera does not have any kind of a stabilization or EIS built in for video, so video is going to be very shaky from the front-facing camera. The third thing that I think I don't personally like is that there is no alert slider. So OnePlus has usually that alert slider for their mute switch and to switch to vibrate, a physical hardware button or slider. And yes, I understand they had to sacrifice that to cut costs, and that's probably nitpicking, but that is a signature hallmark feature of a OnePlus phone. And so if you're familiar with OnePlus, it doesn't quite feel like a OnePlus phone without that alert slider, and you're not getting that. But of course, that's probably not who this phone is targeted for. It's not targeted for OnePlus fans necessarily. It's just trying to get 5G low-cost phones into people's hands, and they probably don't even know who OnePlus is. But I think if you're watching this, you probably are a tech enthusiast, phone enthusiast. You probably know OnePlus, and you do know that they typically come with those sliders. It's not going to be on this phone. Moving on to the fourth thing that I think is a negative or con here is the speaker. So it's a single downfiring speaker. They just kind of chose to sacrifice that as one of the things to hit this price point. And so while not entirely bad, it's not really soft or anything. It's just not the best speaker. And I really think they could have gone with dual front firing speakers. It's been done at this price point, and so stereo just would have been better. But here's a quick sample for you. Moving on to the fifth con for me personally is the outdoor display visibility. While it's not the worst that I've ever seen, it is going to be a little bit dim and you're going to struggle a little bit to see it outdoors. I've seen a whole lot worse. I'm not completely straining. I can see it, as you can see in this sample here. So it's not as bad as maybe some are claiming, and I think it's definitely doable. But of course, outdoor visibility can be improved. It's typical for most phones in this price point, but worth pointing out because a lot of people, that is something important to them. And so depending on your sensitivity to that level of visibility, you can take a look at the sample that I was showing you and determine for yourself if that's going to be bright enough for you. And now moving on to the last con or thing that I don't like, or I think is just worth pointing out, is going to be the Wi-Fi speeds. It does not support Wi-Fi 6 on this, and so you're not going to get the fastest Wi-Fi download speeds. For me, I'm getting roughly half of what I normally get with some of my Wi-Fi 6 supported phones. I've got a Wi-Fi 6 router, and I've got fast internet service, and so I typically get about 400 plus megabytes down on my download from my internet service over Wi-Fi on Wi-Fi 6 devices. On this particular device, I'm getting about roughly around 200 down, so about half of what I normally get. Upload speeds, something about the same. I'm paying for 40 megabit upload speeds, megabit per second upload speeds, and I'm getting that with this device. So it's just the download's about half of what I'm normally used to on Wi-Fi. As you can see, 5G LTE speeds are actually very good. So 5G, and that's the target of this phone, 5G speeds are actually pretty good. I'm getting really fast speeds here with Google Fi, which is basically T-Mobile. And so T-Mobile's been doing some upgrades, and you can see here the 5G speeds are on par with some of my other phones, very fast, even on the upload. It's just that Wi-Fi speeds are about half of what I'm used to compared to my other Wi-Fi 6 devices. All right, so those are my cons or negatives about the Nord N200 I think you should be aware of. But moving on to the pros, the very first thing that I really like about this is the battery life. Battery life on the Nord N200 5G is phenomenal. So again, 5,000 milliamp hour battery, capacity battery, large battery. This is a 2+ day battery for you before it's going to die. So for me, it's always lasted me at least 2 days. I've actually gone up to 4 days on this thing, believe it or not, with 8 to 9 hours of screen on time each time. And this thing basically sips on the battery on standby. So if you don't have access to a charger in your job or wherever you are, you're constantly mobile, you're not going to have to worry about battery life on this thing. It'll definitely last you at least 1 day, probably 2 days. With, again, I'm getting 8 to 9 hours of screen on time, which is amazing. So battery life is really good here on the N200 5G. Next thing that I really like about this is actually the biometrics. So I'm a fan of physical fingerprint scanners. I don't really like the in-display ones, no matter how fast they are. They're just hard to feel for. Physical scanners are a lot better for me. And this one, you don't even have to press the button. It's just a touch sensor. So you can just rest your finger on it and it'll immediately unlock. And so I really like that. It's really fast, and I'm a lefty. And even for you lefties, if you program your finger, as you can see here, it'll unlock just fine. So very fast, responsive, physical fingerprint scanner. I would have preferred it on the rear. It would have been a lot bigger touch target, easier to feel for, but the side mounted one works great. And so this also has face unlock, which has been pretty good here. So you can see it just work right there with that animation, and it unlocks pretty quickly. So, face unlock, you can see they're really quick and fast here. So nice that it does actually have that, and it works really well even in lower lighting conditions. So lower light indoor, even at night, I've noticed that it works no problem. I have other phones that are more inexpensive with face unlock that don't work well in anything other than ideal lighting conditions. So this works in various lighting conditions, and it's very good. So fingerprint scanner, face unlock, very good on this phone. Third thing that I really like is actually the display indoors. So while outdoor visibility may be a little bit of a struggle, indoor visibility is not a problem. I can keep this thing at about 50% to 60% brightness indoors, and it's more than bright enough. Viewing angles look pretty good to me, and it's got a 90 hertz display. So nice, fast, fluid display. So it adds a little bit of fluidity, makes up for some of the performance gaps, and kind of smooths things out a little bit. They didn't have to put 90 hertz refresh rate into this, and so I think that does help with some of the minor hiccups I can see, and it helps with some of the just to smooth out the overall usage and UI of this whole thing. And beyond that, it does support double tap to wake and sleep, which I like. So if you can just double tap to turn it off, double tap to wake the screen right there, and you're in. So you don't always have to fumble for the side button. Sometimes it's tough to look for it or feel for it. All you have to do is just double tap and then it'll unlock. And if you don't want to feel for the button, you can just double tap to put it back to sleep. So I do like that. And the fourth thing that I do like is the software. So for the lack of performance and that Snapdragon 480, Oxygen OS, which is the skin on top of Android 11 on this thing, really helps make up for some of that performance deficit. Oxygen OS, like most of the phone enthusiasts understand, is one of the best skins out there for Android, and they really optimize that software for their hardware. It's very light, crisp, and helps things move along very quickly. It doesn't bog down the hardware to really keep things performing as well as possible. Also, it's pretty much close to stock Android, so it has the Google Discover feed if you like that. Of course, you can turn that off if you don't like it. And it does have a lot of the normal customization features that you find in Oxygen OS. So being able to customize the accent colors, icons, wallpapers, icon packs are supported by the native launcher. You can see the new canvas features here. All that stuff in Oxygen OS for customization is here on their lower end phone, as well as some of the quick gestures. So being able to do things like drawing a circle on your screen to launch the camera from the lock screen. Also being able to do things like maybe drawing a V to turn on the flashlight. You can do all that stuff here. Same like you can do on the higher end OnePlus phones. Now moving on to the fifth pro or thing that I like about this is the camera. So while low light performance isn't great as you would expect, and good lighting, the camera is actually not too bad. It's pretty much as good as can be expected for that main sensor. The macro sensor is pretty much useless, and the depth sensor is just kind of there to make it a triple camera system. But basically the main sensor isn't as bad as you would think. You can take a look at the samples I'm showing you here. As good as it can be expected, some white balance issues, but the focus has been pretty impressive. I can get some pretty good looking macro shots, which I didn't think it would even be able to focus in on. So focus has been pretty good. Camera quality has been as good as you can expect here. Not the best, like I said, some white balance issues, but considering the price point, I was expecting a lot worse. And lastly, the thing that I like and I think other people will appreciate is that there is NFC on board. So if you depend on contactless payments, NFC is here in this lower cost phone. A lot of times they omit NFC to hit this price point. They've included it here, which is, I think, a bonus. All right, so that's my pros and cons after using the Nord N200 5G off and on for the last couple of weeks. I didn't think it was going to be that great based off of the specs on paper and everything, but after using it, it's been mostly a positive experience, which is why you really have to try these things for yourself to see if it's going to be good or not. Don't just judge it on paper. And also, if you're really hyped about getting it for basically free with some basic fees with trading in a phone from that T-Mobile or Metro by T-Mobile deal, I think you're still going to get a good phone. I don't think you're going to jump into this and you're going to regret it. So long as you have the proper expectations, keep the cons that I had in mind and see if those are deal breakers or not for you. Of course, let me know if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. We can continue our conversation on there. I'll answer whatever questions that I can. And as always, thanks for watching.